Welcome back to Haunted and Historic Australia with our Criminals, Cutthroats and Convicts episodes in our Sydney Park Serial Killer series. Episode 7 tells of Thomasina Pocock and the shocking way she was treated in her last hours. Thomasina was murdered on May the 3rd, 1915, with horrific injuries to her uterus and abdomen, much like Rebecca Anderson 10 years later. Let's see if we can piece together how this awful crime happened. With the help of a cockatoo. Thomasina Herle Baird, nicknamed Sina, was born on the 15th of February in 1871 to Scottish coppersmith Alexander Baird and Cornish mother Mary Sampson Thomas Bray. Sina was named after her great-grandmother, Thomasine Teague Herle. Sina was the youngest of 10 children. Her father died in 1882 when Sina was only 11 years old. This would have made things difficult for mother, but it seems the matriarch of the family had a lot to do with arranging her children's marriages, many marrying back into the extended family. Sina was married off at the age of 17 to her first cousin, Henry Thomas Kent, in 1887, her mother's nephew. Henry was a bootmaker and recent widow. He was 11 years older than Sina. This may not have been a happy marriage. However, they did have 2 children. Henry Reginald Kent in 1887, who died a year after birth, and Thomasina Herle Kent in 1889. In 1907, Henry Kent filed for divorce on the grounds that Sina was a drunk and deserter of their marriage. He stated that they had been together for 15 years, when then she started drinking heavily and sought the company of another man. She left her husband for this other man in 1903, returning to her husband to apologise. Daughter Thomasina was 16 at the time, and it is not clear who she stayed with. In 1907, Sina, now 36, did not stay with this other man long, and she married a chimney sweep named Lawrence Stephen Pocock, 54, a widow with grown-up children of his own, and after her divorce with cousin Henry Kent was final, Henry also married again the same year. Sina and Lawrence had a son they named Lawrence Herle Pocock in 1908. Her daughter Thomasina, now 19, also marries in 1907 to a Cyril Horton. Everything seemed great. Everyone married and remarried and happy, well, maybe for a time. But things got very strange. Sina was found dead on the 3rd of May 1915 at 11 o'clock in Prince Alfred Park. She was found by a man named George Casper Watson, who was an employee at the rail yard. There were many people who came forward with the information, but there were 3 in particular who were questioned by police. Watson, who was the man who found her, and also an employee of the water board and sometimes parked out, named William Wiggins. The police began their investigations immediately. Wiggins told police that after he knocked off from work, he would usually take an evening stroll through Alfred Park, usually around 10 p.m. On this night, he walked through the park as he regularly did, and he saw a few people around the park. Walking along the back fence, along the railway line, he noticed the back of a woman seated on a seat near the park gymnasium. There he witnessed a man walk over to the woman and bend over her, taking her wrist in his hands. The man he would later establish was Watson. Wiggins walked over and asked if everything was okay, to which Watson replied, "It is all right." Wiggins walked away, and when he returned about an hour later, the woman was still seated, and Watson, now with another man, was standing close by with a lantern near the woman. Watson states after he checked the woman, he quickly contacted the rail yard night watchman, Alexandria McConnell, who he worked with, and told him there was a dead woman in the park. This was around 11 p.m. When they got to the body, McConnell recognised she was dead and told Watson not to move or touch the body. He'd worked with police back in England and knew they would not want anything touched in the crime scene. They also swept the area to see if anyone was lurking nearby or if they could find anything that would relate to the murder. Watson suddenly said, "Why, she's standing up." McConnell turned around and checked the woman's body again, confirming she was very much dead. As he turned to raise the alarm, Watson again said, "She's waking up. She's walking around." McConnell noted how strange this was, as the woman hadn't moved and Watson appeared to be very nervous. McConnell said to Watson, "This woman will never stand again." At this time, Wiggins came back over to check what was going on and was told the woman was dead. McConnell phoned the police. Sina was wearing a dark blue skirt and blouse, a white hat with a white band. Sergeant Tarpey, on arrival, took Sina's body to the Sydney hospital and was there checked over by a Dr. Jameson, where she was officially pronounced deceased. There were further medical examinations by the coroner, and her underclothing was saturated with blood, yet her legs were clean, where there should have been blood, almost wiped clean. There were 3 distinct pools of blood that they found on the grass where she was seated. The coroner found cause of death to be hemorrhage of the abdomen and uterus. Much like Rebecca Anderson, and in very similar circumstances, both young and married off by their mothers, both turned to drink to escape, and both alone at the time of their death, murdered by a psychopath. They found bruising on both Sina's arms, as well as swelling all over her body. On closer inspection, they also discovered sand was in her clothing and on her hands. Police suspected she'd been moved to the location after being murdered elsewhere, possibly another area of the park. Sina had been away from home since April 29th, which Mr. Lawrence Pocock was not too worried about, as she usually went for days drinking and would eventually come home. He said Sina was addicted to drink and would often have fits. Lawrence Pocock identified the body as being his wife Sina. After an inquest was held, they believed Watson to have committed the murder, so he was charged and sent to trial. A married couple also contacted police, a Mr. and Mrs. Martin. They stated a friend of theirs, Mabel Wilkinson, had spoken to them about a man named Malarkey having burned Watson's clothing to keep him out of trouble. Police interviewed this Mrs. Wilkinson, who denied ever discussing any such thing with them. It was a dead lead. Investigations by police found that Watson finished work at 5 p.m, and there was no reason why he should have still been in the park. McConnell was questioned, and he said that he'd seen Watson in the park many times that night before he approached him about the dead woman. He said he'd seen him in the park as early as 7 p.m, and almost every hour since, until they found the body around 11. He did not notice blood on Watson's hands, though. Despite all of this and a trial for Watson, he was acquitted. There just wasn't enough evidence to send him away. There wouldn't have been any reason for him to have committed such a vile act on a woman, unless he was a complete psychopath. Either way, he was free. Maybe to do it again in 10 years. It is strange the circumstances, though. But it gets stranger. There was the death of Sina's daughter, Thomasina Horton. She died a month and a half later, on the 15th of July. I couldn't find what was the cause of death, only the notice in the paper. Nothing in the newspapers. Was it in childbirth, as she had a daughter the same year? And that daughter died at age 9. Were the family cursed? Or was it another attack by someone they knew? Could she have committed suicide? I can't see that happening as she had a family. Or could it have been something natural or cancer, something along those lines, and it just wasn't publicised? But that wasn't the only death. Lawrence Stephen Pocock, Sina's husband, who identified the body, also dies a year later. This could have been natural causes, as he would have been in his mid-60s. But it is really strange. The three of them all dead within a year of each other, and two of them, mother and daughter, dead within a month and a half. Now, that isn't the strangest thing either. It gets weirder and stranger, because her first husband, Henry Thomas Kent, was also almost charged for murder himself of his first wife, Elizabeth Blanche Kent. Apparently, he was a suspect along with their servant, Caroline Roberts, but they were acquitted of poisoning her, even though Caroline was the one to give her tea before she died. The laudanum bottle that she possibly used belonged to Henry Kent, and he asked her to throw it away. But they couldn't prove at that point that that was what had killed her. She was sick on and off. Could they have been poisoning her over a long period of time? There was suspicion that he was seeing not just the servant, but also her sister. How strange. And only 2 years later, he married Sina. So it's very strange circumstances. Perhaps that's why she took up drinking. Perhaps Henry was trying to kill her too. But then they divorced amicably. So perhaps she knew something that she could blackmail him with, or he was innocent all along. Who knows? Could it have been her previous husband? Could it have been a current husband? Or was it someone she was seeing on the side? She was a drunk and could have had fits too. It may have been that someone like Watson, maybe not Watson, but some psychopath, found her at night having a fit and decided to murder her. Or she may have just been in a drunk stupor, but they've taken her life in the most cruel and vile way. She may have been the earliest, but she will not be the last victim in our Sydney Park serial killers series. So stay tuned as we go through the 1940s, when the Aussie men were all at war. And these women who were murdered may have all been done so by the Sydney Park serial killer.